Life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got no burdens around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like.
At a football game recently, sitting towards the top like this, and I found myself clapping, and I thought, wait, does this even matter? Like, can they even hear a clap from way down there on the field? If our goal as fans is to make as much noise as possible, what is the scientifically proven best way to do that? Should you stomp or yell? And should your yell be high-pitched or low-pitched? Does cupping your hands make a difference? What about one of these? Or this? Or one of these? And should the cheering method change depending on where your seats are? I had some guesses, so as a firm believer in the scientific method, I decided to test my hypotheses. So I've got a control group of 3 fans. And some real nice audio equipment. So they are gonna sit in a bunch of different seats all over the stadium and cheer in all the different possible ways. And then we're gonna analyze which cheers are the loudest from down here on the field. But first, I needed a baseline to compare our cheering to, and since I attended grad school at USC, they let me come back to the Coliseum to take some measurements. And while everyone else was enjoying the game, I was dutifully collecting audio data. Mostly. So now that I've got my baseline for the full stadium, I think it's time to do our experiment in the empty stadium. You guys ready? Yeah! So our fans stood in 12 different locations throughout the stadium, and in each location they cycled through the same 11 cheers. And then me and my buddy Marcelo, who happens to have a PhD in acoustics, stood at center field and recorded the data. Okay, so we're finished and we're currently processing the data. But before we state the results, I think it's important to review the science behind how hearing works. Your eardrums are fancy biological sensors that tell you if anything is pushing on them. It's like if you blow on the back of your hand, you can feel the pressure from the blown air, only your eardrums are millions of times more sensitive than that. So these guys represent individual air molecules, and when you hear that lovely bird chirping, what's actually happening is the bird's throat is moving and it pushes the air molecules right next to it, which pushes the molecules next to it and causes a chain reaction called a longitudinal wave. And those crashes keep happening until they crash into the air molecules in your ear canal, which then crash into your eardrum, causing it to move just a little. And then depending on the pattern of movement from the repeated crashes, your brain is like, oh, I recognize that as a bird chirp. And if the molecules are crashing in at a high frequency, we hear that as a high pitch. And if they're crashing in at a low frequency,
we hear that as a low pitch.
And the greater distance your eardrum gets pushed in, our brain registers that as a loud sound. Okay, now for the results. For starters, here is the baseline for the loudest sounds I recorded at the actual game. And then for comparison, we took the recorded sound measurements from our 3 fans and scaled them up. So this is how loud it would be if all 94,000 people in the Coliseum were clapping at once. Not surprisingly, clapping is in last place as far as loudness of all the cheers go. Next up in 8th place are these thunderstick things. They look sort of obnoxious, but they're not actually that loud. And now in 7th, we have booing, which was a bit surprising to me. It was so low in the rankings. And as you can see, we are now louder than the max sounds I recorded at the game. And this makes sense, because you never actually have all 94,000 people cheering at the same time. Which raises sort of an obvious observation, which is that sound is cumulative, so you want to make sure everybody is pitching in. Next up, we have a tie for 5th place between the cowbell and the vuvuzela. This was again a surprise to me because I remember the constant drone from all of the vuvuzelas from the 2010 World Cup. But when we were standing at center field, we definitely agreed it wasn't as loud as some of the other cheers. I think they're just really easy for one person to make a long, sustained noise with. And so when you have a couple thousand people with them, you get this constant drone, but it's not actually that loud to the human ear. Which brings up a good point. We are measuring loudness here and not the typical sound pressure or decibels. Decibels aren't actually that great for measuring how a human ear perceives sound, because at a constant decibel level, we actually perceive certain frequencies as louder than others. Loudness accounts for that, so it's a better measurement of what you would actually hear down here on the field. Additionally, the loudness scale is linear, so if you double the loudness, that would mean in real life it would seem twice as loud. And in 3rd place, we have another tie between screaming at the top of your lungs without a cone or cupping your hands, and screaming at the top of your lungs with cupping your hands or using a cone. And this seemed counterintuitive at first until we noticed the effect of the cone was only slightly more pronounced when you were really close to the field. So the further from the field you are, the less of a difference it makes, because as soon as your voice leaves the cone, the pressure wave propagates in all directions, so it's diffused by the time it hits the field either way. It is encouraging though that from the perspective of the players' ears on the field, yelling at the top of your lungs is more effective than all this other stuff. Okay, so to set the stage for the 1st and 2nd loudest cheer, remember that in a sport like American football, your goal as a fan is to make so much noise that the players' eardrums are moving in and out so much that they can't sense the smaller eardrum movements of the snap count, and so they false start and get a penalty. This is why the Seahawks, who recently held the world record for the loudest stadium, also have the most false start penalties by a comfortable margin, which means the fans are directly affecting the outcome of the game. And so finally, sort of not surprisingly, in 1st place we have the air horn. But a very close 2nd place was one of these weird things. It's sort of like a kazoo on steroids. It's nearly as loud as an air horn, but it's small and discreet, and it's powered by your own lungs. Very few sporting leagues have explicit rules against noisemakers because they're hard to enforce. And so I'm not advocating this, but I'll simply point out that these things are really cheap, and a student section could pitch in and get 1,000 of these things for about $100 online. So that is the cold hard science on cheering. But as thorough men of science, we knew there was one final scenario we needed to test for all those watching the game at home.
Throw it! Oh, come on! You can't run the ball on 3rd and long. You gotta throw it!
You get anything, Marcella? Sorry.
Friday, gotta get down on Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend Friday.
Congratulations to this week's Seiko student shoutouts. Thank you, Conquistadors, for all that you do to make Arroyo Seiko great. Keep up the good work. Remember, we lead, others follow.
Congratulations to our winners of our very first digital noontime, Yazreen Perez, Ryan Montano, and Alyssa Fogel. Thank you to all that participated, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Are you a UCLA or USC fan? Do you cheer War Eagle or rise and shout the Cougars are out? This Wednesday's Spirit Day is College Day. Show your school spirit by wearing your favorite college's gear.
We are the Senior Sports Commission.
I'm the sports commissioner. Today I'll be teaching you how to start a club. To start a club, you need a minimum of 5 students, a teacher to supervise or run your club, and then a topic for your club. To get a teacher to run your club, feel free to ask or email. Club ideas are limitless. They could range from maybe basketball or programming, but you have to stay private. To put in a request to create a club, you'll have a Google form in the Spirit Group classroom. And in that form, you need to fill out the name of the club, who is supervising your club, and the first 5 members. First, you to know that you have the teacher confirmation. You'll need to email Ms. Mraz or CC her in the email that you sent to your teacher when you email them. Or you'll have to have your teacher who's supervising email Ms. Mraz separately, saying that they are willing to supervise that club.
Find something you love to do. Do it every day. Be obsessed. Balance can come later. Use your imagination. Put pen to paper. Declare your intentions. Set small goals. Knock them off, set more goals.
You have a lot of potential as a child, but none of that is capable of manifesting itself as freedom before you become disciplined.
Build confidence. Grow a deep belief. Outwork people. Play the long game. You don't have to be the chosen one. The secret is to build the resolve and spirit to enjoy the plateaus. The times when it doesn't feel like you're improving and you question why you're doing this. If you're patient, the plateaus will become springboards. Finally, never stop striving, reaching for your goals until you get there. But the truth is, even when you get there, even when you get here, standing on this stage, it's the striving, fighting, pushing yourself to the limit every day that you'll miss and you'll long for.
If you want to be a grocer or a general or a politician or a judge, you will invariably become it. That is your punishment. If you never know what you want to be, if you live what some might call the dynamic life, but I will call the artistic life, if each day you are unsure of who you are and what you know, you will never become anything, and that is your reward.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you.
How many of us, I wonder, can recall that childhood moment when we experienced happiness as a state of being, that single moment of untarnished joy, that moment when everything in our world, inside and out, was all right. Everything was all right.